Well, the first one we got down here was on the her. Well, that's Old English, aho, A-H-O with an accent over H. Then later it was two words, aho, and it means on the slant. And slightly on the her means slightly on the slant. So it's going back once again to Old English. Come along together, cheerio together. I mean, that is typical. That goes back to the Old English for to gather. So you together becomes together. But in Suffolk and Norfolk, we also keep it as a singular as well as the plural. So it gets a bit strange when you hear things like, can you get on the bus one at a time together? Now, a lot of people get this wrong. That'll learn you. Learn does not mean that'll learn you, because that's bad English. Learn goes back to Anglo-Saxon, Old English, laren, and it means to teach. Now, the German word today for to teach is lehren. So laren was the North Germanic dialect for lehren. So when we say that'll learn you, that means that will teach you. But it's not peculiar to Suffolk and Norfolk. It goes all the way down the east coast, from Kent right the way up to Geordieland. Right, Larn. So in Geordieland, they've got a book called Learn Yourself Geordie. Learn Yourself Geordie. So it's all the way down. Hold you hard. That means, you know, slow down or take your time. So hold you hard, telling someone to wait. That comes from people telling the driver of a horse and cart, or carter or whoever, to hold hard on the reins, to slow down or wait. So that's where we get hold hard from. Over Will's mothers. Right, it's peculiar to Suffolk and Norfolk, but there are other places where they also say over Will's mothers. And in Australia, they say it's over Bill's mums. Now that came about when William of Orange came on the throne in England, right? So he was a Stuart and he was Dutch, and his mother remained in Holland. Now there's the old phrase, when the east winds do blow we shall have snow, and that's rather black coming over from that direction, from the east. So as Will's mothers lived in Holland and the black clouds were coming from that way, that was dark over Will's mothers. And that's how we get that phrase, Will's mothers. You'll find in Norfolk they'll say keep a troshin, North Suffolk is keep a troshin, and then South Suffolk is keep a throshin. And that really is a dialect version of keep a threshing. So threshing is when you sort of separate the wheat from the chaff and you end up with your flour eventually, right? So really what it means is long may you keep threshing the corn. So it's wishing somebody a long, happy, healthy life. Just the same way as in Scotland, they'll say lang me a lumrick, lang me a lumrick, long may your chimney smoke. So it's wishing someone a long, happy, healthy life, and that's what that means. On the drag, though, is Suffolk, and it means running behind time, and this is believed to derive from a Suffolk fisherman or seafaring folk. Now, the incoming tides along the Suffolk coast come in at a rare rate of knots, but they have a strong undercurrent, which was known locally as the drag tide. So if you was coming in on that tide, right, you were thinking you should go in there at 7 knots, but the drag tide underneath is holding you back, and you're going in slower than what you thought you should be. So you're on the drag tide, which eventually gets shortened to on the drag, which then other people, landlubbers, sort of cottoned onto, and on the drag means running late. A load of old squid. Well, I hope you think I haven't been speaking a load of old squid, but squid derives from the East Anglian pronunciation of the Middle English word squirt. Squirt. Now, squirt originally meant a contemptible person or a load of old nonsense. What has transpired that squirt now means a little detestable person and squid means a load of nonsense. Ranny, now that's a shrew, and that comes from the Old Norse ranny, meaning a snout, and ranny is also a Suffolk nickname for someone with a long nose. Rove, that's a scab on a partially healed sore, and that comes from Old Norse, ruva. So this is the Viking influence again. Sarnic, to dawdle. I puff and pant like an old steam train when I zarnic up the hills. So that's when I walk slowly or wander up the hills. It comes from Old Norse, senka. Strup, for the throat, the gullet or windpipe, and that's from the Old Norse strupa. And strupa is also the Swedish word for the throat today. Titimatorta, now that's a seesaw, and that comes from the Old Norse titimatorta. And children years ago when they're playing on a seesaw, they used to chant Titimatorta, ducks in the water, Titimatata, geese come after. And Titimatorta was taken over to America by the East Anglians in the 1600s, and the American word for a seesaw today is titatorta. So it's still there. Pollywiggle is a tadpole. Now this is Old English, and it comes from the Middle English word poll, meaning head, and wiggle. So it's a head with a wiggly tail, which describes a tadpole. But it was also taken to America in the 1600s by East Anglians, and the American word for a tadpole today is pollywig or pollywog. Earwiggle, that's an earwig, and from the original Old English word earwig, and it means an ear insect, because ancient folklore thought that when you were asleep, this insect went and crept into your brain via your ear, and that's how we get the name earwig. But once again, earwiggle is going. So earwiggle is not a silly way of pronouncing earwig, because earwiggle was the original word of which earwig derived from, but we still use the old one. Boar. Now, boar. Mine how you go, boar. Now it depends on what part of East Anglia you are. Now we're now in Edwardstone, right between Lavenham and Sudbury on the back road. Now round here it's mine how you go, buh. When you get to Bury St Edmunds, it's mine how you go, bah. When you get to Bury St Edmunds, it's mine how you go, bah. When you get to Stowmarket and Needham-market, it's mine how you go, boh. And when you get to East Suffolk, like Snape, that's mine how you go, boar. And then when you get into Norfolk, it's boar. It's a longer one, right? And a lot of people think that's the Suffolk and Norfolk way of saying boy. It's not, because boy, that comes from the Middle English word, B-O-Y-E, meaning a young male servant. But that word was being used long before that word came into existence in Middle English. And it goes back to Old English, B-O-O-R, boar. And it means somebody who tills the soil. The Dutch have a similar word, boer, and we had the Boer Wars, which was the Dutch farmers in Africa. The Germans have a similar word, bauer, which also means farmer. So that's where that one comes from, somebody who tills the soil. Apsy, that's a boil or an abscess, and it's one of the very few dialect words we actually took from the Normans. And the Norman word was absy, but it was spelt differently, A-B-C-E-S, and we all anglicise it to abscess. But the Suffolk people kept it the same pronunciation as the Normans by saying absy. Frawn, very cold, frozen, frawn are cold, and it's a derivative of the Old English friosen. You see where frozen come from as well, can't you? Shoe, I show them how to do it. And this, yes, this is going back to Elizabethan English, Shakespearean English. And there's some form of consistency to this too. We don't say I knowed, we say I knew. And not I throwed, but I threw. And then I drew instead of I drawed, I grew instead of I growed. So I show them how to do it. There is some form of consistency about there. And it was not until the late 1700s when these public schools got together and then they made showed as the past tense of the verb show rather than shoe. But we've kept the old way. Morther, I'll have to tell my little old Mawther she'll have to come along with me. Mawther is either a young girl or a girlfriend, and a word that we got from the lowland countries, so we've taken on that word. Potshit. Now that's got two definitions. Firstly, it's pottery made out of broken earthenware, or it's an earthenware egg, false egg, that you put under the hen to try and get a broody and to lay eggs. Crinkle crankle. Now this is a Suffolk word. It's the crinkle crankle walls are the serpentine walls. Now there are over 50 crinkle crankle walls in Suffolk, and if you add all the other crinkle crankle walls in the country together, it doesn't come anywhere near that. I think there's a few in South Norfolk, there's a few in North Essex, there's a couple in Hertfordshire, and then I think there's a couple of three in Hampshire, right? Now when we employ, this is mainly in the Stuart times, East Anglia especially Suffolk, we employed Dutch engineers to come in and either irrigate the soil, drain the soil, or reclaim the soil, right? And the Dutch engineers, obviously with their polder lands, they were the experts, so we brought them in. Well, they built their windy walls, and it saves a lot of bricks, because if you build an ordinary wall, which are two bricks together with plinths and supports, the one that goes around Eastern Farm Park, you would need 1.5 million more bricks to build a conventional wall than buy a crinkle crankle, which is 1 brick thick, and because it's like a bit of corrugated iron, so whichever way the wind blows, it's going to be self-supporting. So and you don't have to have any plinths or supports, and you save lots and lots of bricks. Now the Old English word for windy, we're talking crankle, right? And the Dutch word for windy is kronkel, so we end up with crinkle crankle. Some Suffolk people say crinkly crankly, because they pronounce the E on the end just the same way as they pronounce greeny king instead of green king. So that's the crinkle crankle wall.